if Kyle and I were the stars of True Detective, all crimes would go unsolved.
Especially because our old teammate Shirley Najak, he would always say, I'm not worried about the focal point on the screen. I'm watching around there. That's where the good stuff is.
That's right.
We blew
That's
it.
exactly what he talks about. We blew it. We blew it. We blew chunks.
Welcome to 32 Thoughts, the podcast presented by GMC. Kyle Bukauskas, Elliotte Friedman with you. And Elliotte, when I first started at Sportsnet, long before I was working rinkside on NHL telecasts, I can remember going to the rink, going to a morning skate, and being so struck by walking into the dressing room as all the media came in to interview players and seeing one Christine Simpson, who I had watched on my television for a number of years, interact with the players and the coaches, how much respect that she had and the appreciation that those players showed for her. And I thought that was the ultimate tell, one of the ultimate tells of where you wanted to be in this business and being respected at that level. And earlier this week, Elliotte, Christine shared that her time at Sportsnet had come to an end. She had been part of the fabric of the network since it first went on the air in 1998. She is someone that we are going to miss.
Yes, Kyle, very well said. So Christine lives in Toronto, but she goes back and forth to London, Ontario quite a bit to visit her family. And that's about a 2-hour drive, give or take, depending on how slowly or quickly you drive. And that was a place where she would always tell me that she would listen to the pod. She used her drives to and from the city to catch up with the podcast and make sure she was up to date with it. So I know she was a big listener. She was also a great teammate. And the features she did were always first rate. There were times that players weren't sure, teams weren't sure they wanted to do a feature. Are you sending us Elliotte? No, not interested. Oh, you're sending us Christine? For sure. We'd be happy to do it. So she definitely has a pull when it comes to all the people around the NHL. It is very weird. When I first saw her tweet on Wednesday, I really didn't even know what to say because it's just very weird, the idea of a Sportsnet without Christine. She's pretty much been here since the beginning and outdates you and me for sure, our arrivals at the station. So it's just a very strange thing, not easy to process, and it's just weird that she's not going to be around. But we wish her all the best. And Christine, I hope you keep listening.
And you know, Elliotte, one of the players that Christine would have spent a lot of time interviewing over the years was Sidney Crosby. You and I were just at the NHLPA Player Media Tour in Las Vegas earlier this week. And our first interview, bright and early Tuesday morning, was the captain of the Pittsburgh Penguins. And it's funny, in our episode last week, you had kind of joked as you had shared the information that you had at the time with where things were at with Crosby and the Penguins and what a potential new contract would look like and why one hadn't been signed yet. You wondered, what kind of mood was Sid going to be in? How was he going to greet you? But he came into our room smiling, in great spirits, clearly had a great summer, and was in a really good frame of mind as well.
Kyle, I was thinking about this. I'm trying to remember the first time they did this event. I remember that in 2009, after they won the Stanley Cup, we did a piece with Malkin and Crosby. They both came together and we sat them down. We watched a bunch of plays from their Stanley Cup run, but I can't remember if that's the first time it was ever done or it was even predating that. But Crosby comes to this every year, and this was, and not to say that he was in a terrible mood the previous times, but this was probably the best season opening mood I've ever seen him in. Like, we had to do him at 6:45 a.m. He was the first guy. He made it very clear that that was the best time for him. And if Sidney Crosby says, you know what, I need to do it then you're going to show up and you're going to do it. But he walked in the room. That stood out to me too. Just what a great mood he was in and how accommodating he was. People will hear what he has to say. As everybody knows now, he indicated that a contract is going to get done with the Penguins. He kind of downplayed, you'll hear it in the interview, he downplayed what I talked about, that, the concern about maybe the Penguins aren't going to be very good, and if that played any kind of effect on his decision making, he poo-pooed that kind of. But I think the most interesting thing now, and again, you'll be able to hear some of his comments in the upcoming conversation, but to me, the most interesting thing here is going to be the term. And the one thing I really believe about Sid is that one of my favorite baseball players was Mike Schmidt. And if you were a Mike Schmidt fan, you'll remember that he retired 2 months into his last season. He just said, I'm not Mike Schmidt anymore. And, he could have been a mere mortal instead of a Hall of Fame level third baseman. But he said, no, you know what? That's not good enough for me. And he just said, before I drop off to a level that I really think is unacceptable, I'm going to retire. And one of the people who's friendly with Crosby has told me in the past, and I can't remember if I've discussed this on the pod before, that if he wanted to, instead of being a number one center, he could easily turn himself into a 40-goal winger. But I just don't see... I see Crosby in the same vein as the Mike Schmidt. I think there is a level he expects to see himself at, and he's not going below that level. Now, the one thing he has changed is that he once said, as you pointed out, he's not playing when he's 40. Now, he's kind of backed away from that now. I guess that's what happens when you just had 94 points and barely missed the top 10 in scoring. So he thinks that his level is still very high, deeper into his career. But to me, he's not, it doesn't sound like he's going to go for a ton of term, because he wants to make sure that he's still the same Sidney Crosby. And the other thing I was told this week after the pod we previously did is that Crosby wants to make sure that his contract, if he does get to a point where he says, okay, that's enough, or he feels there's a diminishing or anything like that, he doesn't want his contract to be a concern for the Penguins. It comes to a point where, they might get stuck with something or a cap hit or something like that. I do think I've heard he's very aware of that, and he wants to protect both the way he plays, and he's very conscious of nothing he signs could be problematic cap-wise for the Penguins. Not that they would ever complain. So I think these are the kinds of things we're looking at here.
I just think, Elliotte, you've been doing this for a long time. How many other examples of guys can you think of that think that way? I mean, it's one thing to keep yourself at a certain standard and not want to continue playing if you don't think you can get there, but also the frame of mind of going, I want to make sure the franchise that I've spent my entire career with doesn't get faced with any type of salary cap hurdles. If that is the case, I just think it's another example of him, Sidney Crosby, kind of being in the class of his own here.
There's no doubt about that, Kyle. He's obviously hugely loyal to the Penguins. And his legacy with that organization is not only important to them, but it's important to him. Again, not that he ever would. I just don't think he ever wants anything he does to affect the organization negatively. I think that's very, very important to him. And a couple of people said that it was very, very important to him. So we'll get a contract in the next little while. And, again, I think the biggest thing I'm curious about is the term and where the 8.7 is going to be in the contract.
Yes.
Is it going to be 10.875? He kind of laughed that off. I tried that one too, and he wasn't going there. But I'm wondering if it's going to be 10.875 or something like that.
So that's a big win for not only Penguins fans, but hockey fans. The idea that Crosby is more open to playing later in his career than maybe he was a couple of years ago. So as 87 figures out how the twilight years of his career are going to look, we've got another player who was in Vegas, Elliotte, that doesn't have a contract signed, that's still in the very early stages of his career, and that's Cole Perfetti of the Winnipeg Jets. And it's interesting, it was maybe a little bit of a surprise with the fact that he didn't have a new contract done, that he was still the Jets representative here at this event, because you knew he was going to be facing the same question over and over again about where things stood in the negotiations. But, he came into our room, spent some time with our colleague Luke Fox. This was a young player who was confident, had no problem answering the questions he knew was coming his way. It just seemed like this was a young player that's very comfortable in his own skin and knows that there's a path to getting something done sooner rather than later.
I'm trying to remember a situation, Kyle, where a player without a contract showed up at this. I'm not saying it's never happened because I can't say that for certain, but I don't remember it ever happening. And I think it says a lot about Perfetti and the Jets and where everybody thinks this is going that he was here. Now, I've said before, and I still believe it to be true, I don't think this will be a term deal. I think it's going to be a bridge, a short-term contract. I would be surprised if it was anything different than that. And while both sides are still being really quiet on this, as I left Vegas on Thursday, I still was under the impression there was a bit of a gap still to solve. Always reminding people that this could change with one phone call. So we'll see where it goes. But overall, the fact that Perfetti showed up in this situation is a good omen for everybody involved here, including the Jets fans. I thought his quotes to Luke were really interesting, about what Rick Bowness told him. I did the same thing with Jason Robertson and Rupe Hintz, and now they're stars. Rupe Hintz, by the way, he cut his hair short. It's blonde. Yeah. The Dallas players are calling him the real Slim Shady. That's his new nickname right now. That's outstanding. He was laughing when he told us that. But, he said he disagreed, but, he understood what at least Bowness was thinking. He was very calm and he was very rational discussing it. And we've seen with some of these conversations, particularly Swayman Boston, it's really spilled out into the media and it hasn't been pretty. We're not there yet. I think that Perfetti would have preferred this get started on earlier, but he's not panicking or like in any kind, at least right now, he's not in any kind of frame of mind where he's saying, I'm angry at the Jets or this is going to be a problem. Although, once training camp starts, you're hoping for everybody's sake that this is sorted out.
Okay, so you mentioned his name just a moment ago, Elliotte. Jeremy Swayman, the RFA netminder in Boston. Negotiation that, by all accounts, had a wide gap between the two sides. Any update there? Are they inching any closer?
I'm not hearing anything like that. I know there were some reports that maybe Swayman and the Bruins were closer than people had thought, or even I had thought. I don't have, again, with the caveat that anything can change in one phone call. I just don't have any reason to believe that yet at this point in time. It should be pointed out that Louis Gross, who represents Swayman, also represented the Gaudreau brothers. So he had other more important things on his mind. I have no doubt that the Bruins were respectful of that. The whole hockey world was outstanding when it came to just rallying around the family over the last couple of weeks. But I think it put a temporary halt to the Swayman proceedings. And at this point in time, I just don't have any information that the gap is closed. What's really interesting is some of the conversations I had in Vegas about this particular situation is that they wondered if anybody involved here would go back in time if they could. If you could use and had access to H.G. Wells' time machine, that's a really hip young reference. But if you had access to H.G. Wells' time machine, could you go back in time and say, we'll do arbitration? And I think Swayman's pretty clear that he wouldn't, but I wonder if the Bruins would. If the Bruins would have done it, then Swayman could pick the term of the award 1 or 2 years, and 2 years walks him right to unrestricted free agency. The Bruins knew that. They wanted no part of that. They were well aware of that idea. But I just wonder now if with a little bit of 2020 hindsight, and this is always second guessing, the Bruins would just say, you know what, we should have taken the 2-year award that they would have asked for, and we could have dealt with, we would have at least had him signed for 2 years at an arbitration number, which everyone could have lived with. and then sorted out the long-term contract either next summer or during the following season. Like they signed Pastrnak, 60% into his unrestricted free agent year. They got it all worked out. Like, so I kind of look at this and wonder if we could do this all over again, if the Bruins would just say, we'll fall into the arbitration 2-year trap and deal with it later, punt the problem down the road. Because, it hasn't been easy. It's been very challenging. And I don't know yet what the solution here is going to be.
I guess I'm just trying to understand here, Elliotte. Like last year in the playoffs, Swayman was their guy when the chips were down.
Yes.
They traded Ullmark. He's in Ottawa now. I understand Jonas Korpisalo came back the other way, but Swayman is their de facto number one guy here. So my question is, like, I understand the Bruins can't hand over a blank check, but how did they expect this to go?
Yeah, I had some people who asked me about that too, is why would they have made the Ullmark deal without signing Swayman? I think my theory on that is, and again, it's my theory, is that you'll remember the Ullmark trade was right before July 1st. And
right before Game 7 of the Cup final.
Yes, that was a wild couple of minutes. Bucks dropping. What? Ullmark's getting traded to Ottawa? Ullmark could have switched the teams on his list. And at that point in time, they could trade Ullmark to Ottawa without asking him. And if you go to July 1st, what happens if Ullmark switches his list? So my guess is that had everything to do with why that happened at that time. I think a lot of things here. I had a general manager tell me watching this whole situation that this is another reminder. Like every few years, you get a reminder of why you cannot take an important player to arbitration. And he said everyone is looking at this, and the way Swayman has learned from it, has commented about it, has discussed it, and it's a reminder of why arbitration can be such a dangerous thing. Dangerous, because I think the executives go in there and they understand it's a business. They're used to negotiating. They do it all the time. They're usually a little bit older. The players tend to be younger. They haven't seen this as much before. And, one of the great stories I remember is Tim Taylor, who was the Stanley Cup champion with the Red Wings and the Lightning. I remember when he retired and became an executive, I can't remember if it was the Blues or the Flames or who it was. I don't even want to look at it. Somebody can tell me who it was. But he talked about how being in the box during a game with the other management for the first time, and he heard about the way they talked about the players. And he said, like, I am almost 40 and I can't believe what this sounds like. So I think this has been a real eye-opener for some managers and teams around the league, that this is why you don't get too many arbitration cases anymore, because especially a young player can take it very personally, and not everyone can just say that's business and throw it away. Sometimes it really can shape your feelings and your negotiations in the future.
Okay, it was St. Louis, by the way, Elliotte. That's where Tim Taylor began his front office career once his playing days were done. So you were right
this
there.
Is the thing. You see, this is the thing, Kyle. This is your job. Clean up on aisle 4. I make a mess out of this podcast, and you correct the mistakes.
Fact checker.
That's
all I've got. And I will carry it. I will run with it. All right, so let's check in then on a few other RFAs around the league. Detroit, Moritz Seider, Lucas Raymond, Jonathan Berggren as well. Any updates from Hockeytown?
No, Mr. Fear of God Yzerman and very quiet guy. Not a lot I'm getting here. Like I've said, I think Berggren gets done. I just think the player and everybody involved there recognizes that Berggren has to be in camp. I don't see a situation where he sits out. As I mentioned in the last pod, I think they have an idea of what Seider and Raymond could look like, and they'll just find, if they're not done, they'll just slide Berggren in there at a number where they think it can all work. I would be shocked if that one isn't sorted out well in advance of the season. It's too important for the player. As for the other two, with Raymond, I had mentioned the Jarvis contract as comparable. Jarvis is 7.9 in actual cash, 7.4 with the deferred money and the AAV. And because they both have 130-goal season, Jarvis and Raymond, I thought it was perfect. And I had an agent tell me, I guarantee to you that you are wrong in terms of what Raymond's people, his agent is JP Barry, what they're looking for. And I said, oh, yeah, why do you think I'm wrong? And he said, because there's other players like Stützle, who's at a higher number than Seth Jarvis is. So if you're an agent, you're always going to pick the highest possible comparable. And in this case, I think it's Stützle. Now, what he did tell me, though, this agent, is that he said that there are some teams out there who really try to remove the Ottawa contracts like Stützle's as a comparable. They kind of talk about that as that's a contract that Ottawa needed to do because of where they were at the time and the message they were trying to send their market at the time. But the teams think it's too high. And they said, and like he laughed, he said, I guarantee to you, they brought out Stützle and Yzerman said, don't even bring that here. That's their situation, and that's not our situation. But he did say to me he thought my estimate of Jarvis is probably too low for the ask, although there's no question that Yzerman is lower than where the agent and the player want to be. Seider, all I think about there is I think his number's above Raymond, and I just don't know where this is going to go here. The other thing I've heard is that I've heard some of these players who are coming in from Europe, who don't have contracts yet, once they're signing, I heard the visas are taking a long time. So, I don't know what you can do there. Like, ultimately, the negotiations got to be first. But someone was telling me in a couple of cases it's taken a lot longer than people were hoping. So, again, I think it's Seider at a higher number than Raymond. A couple of people said my Jarvis theory is probably too low for the agent and probably still too high for Yzerman, and that he guarantees that the Stützle one's been brought up as a comparable because their numbers were reasonably close, especially I think at even strength. But he guarantees there's no way Yzerman's even listening to that as a proper comparable. So we'll see.
Okay, Dawson Mercer, New Jersey.
Again, with Dawson Mercer, I've said before, and I'll stick with it, I just don't think there's space for the Devils to do long term. So I think that's going to be a bridge. I've also said the same thing about Thomas Harley. It was interesting. I did have a couple of people who said to me they think there will be an attempt to go long term there, but I just don't know how Dallas can make that work necessarily. I mean, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. There also doesn't seem to be as much angst about Harley's deal as there has been about some of the other ones. One of the reasons is that Jim Nill, tends to be a pretty calm guy generally. But there just doesn't appear to be the angst around Harley as some of the other contracts.
All right, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Couple of transactions, signings this week. Nick Robertson, they sign him for 1 year. Jani Hakanpää comes in on defense on a 1-year deal. And Elliotte, if I'm not mistaken, you had linked those two from kind of the outset of free agency. This week it becomes official. Max Pacioretty signs a PTO, so he, along with Steven Lorentz, come into camp looking for a full-time gig. It was a busy few days of business for Toronto, and now they're going to have a busy roster to kick off training camp.
Yeah, and sometimes those handshake deals stay quiet until they're done, but Alan Walsh, who's the agent for Pacioretty, he basically came out and said, there's a contract here.
Very on brand.
There's no secrets there. That one's, what's funny about that is, so I took my wife and son to see Pink this summer at the Rogers Center, and we walked into Pacioretty on the street. And
no way.
I said hi to him. I said, what are you doing here? And he kind of gave me I'm here visiting some friends. And I really didn't think much of it because I was with my family. That one just smacked me right in the face, and I totally missed it. That obviously he was here, skating and working out for the Leafs at that time. The one thing I really think about Tree Living is I think he's prepared to have some competition here. I don't think him and Berube are afraid of, hey, if you get a great offer, you make your move, right? But I don't think they're afraid of letting some players who would look at this and think, am I on the bubble here? Be a little bit uncomfortable. I don't think they're afraid of that. I think they want the competition. I think they want to see who it drives. And it wouldn't surprise me. Like, you don't have to have your roster set until the day before the season begins. So it wouldn't shock me if the Leafs let this play out a little bit. And I think that is their plan. Again, you could get a good offer. You say, we got to take this. I think they're interested in making their camp a little more competitive. And so we'll see where that goes.
Were you at all surprised that despite the trade request earlier in the summer that Nick Robertson signs back in Toronto for 1 year?
I just think the options were limited.
Okay.
I think as we said last week, it didn't benefit him to sit out. And I'm talking about this as a guy who's really stubborn. Like, I am a really annoyingly stubborn human being. So I get where Robertson's coming from, but sometimes you just have to take the knee and concede defeat. You bend the knee, like they said on Game of Thrones, Kyle. You bend the knee. And
Very
this
good.
was Robinson's time where it was better for him that he just said, all right, I'm coming and I'll do this. So I think he did the right thing. I don't think it was very easy to convince him, but I think that he did the right thing. And again, there's going to be some opportunity here. And the thing that benefits the Maple Leafs, and it also benefits him, is that if he plays well, everyone wins. He wins because it sets himself up into a good place. The team wins because Robertson's playing great. So there's a huge benefit for everyone involved here to make this work. I also think, Kyle, sometimes teams get pushed around by players when they have the leverage. So when a team thinks it has the leverage, sometimes they like to push back. And I think that definitely happened with Robertson.
Okay, some news on the injury front across the league this week as well, Elliotte. A few days ago, we learned that Artyom Levshunov, the second overall pick by Chicago at this past June's draft in Vegas, he's going to miss some time. And it was announced on Thursday by the New Jersey Devils, Luke Hughes, who's entering his sophomore year in the NHL, Calder Trophy finalist last year. He's been dealing with a shoulder injury. They expect him to miss 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, the internet sleuths found that one. Standing on the Michigan sideline in the sling?
Yes, right.
I always love when that happens because I know what the teams are thinking. The teams are like, we're going to wait. We're going to announce this at the start of camp. Like this Sorokin thing, he didn't skate the other day at the Islanders captain's practice. It seems pretty clear now that whatever the case is, the Islanders are either going to announce it at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon or on the first day of training camp. And so it sounds to me like the Devils, it was obviously their plan, but then, he's standing, someone sees him standing in the sideline. Like, it's so funny now. Like, one of the things they teach you is that when you're posting a picture, people aren't just going to look at the main focal point of the picture. You better check the background. So
Yes.
I'll give you an example. When I was in Prague, we're doing the walk and talk with Philip Hronek, and the Canucks posted some pictures. No problem, all good. But I'm wearing like a pair of pants and a suit jacket, a blazer, as I'm walking down the streets of Prague with Hronek, and I've got my hand in my pocket, and it looks like I'm scratching myself. And some of the Canucks fans, they blew up that part of the picture and they sent it to me and they're like, Elliotte, are you itchy? And I'm just laughing. Like, it's funny. You can't not laugh at that, but it's always a reminder that whatever picture you post, you better make sure there's nothing going around that's not the focal point that you think is harmless that becomes the picture. Because that's what happened here with Luke Hughes. So, what's funny about that is we asked Jack in Vegas about what kind of season he thought Luke is going to have. And I thought about it. Jack hesitated a bit. So he obviously knew, but he didn't want to say anything. We didn't ask Quinn that because our interview with Quinn went off in a lot of different directions. So we didn't have time to get to that. I wanted to ask him about Luke's second season, but I wondered too if he would have clammed up and held to the omerta, or he would have said something. So that's unfortunate for Luke Hughes. Maybe it gives them some space to sign Mercer now, but I also think that that's more of a philosophical thing as opposed to a cap space one, at least in terms of the bridge deal, in terms of the number they're looking at. Who was the other guy you asked about, the other injury?
Levshunov.
Oh, yeah. So Levshunov is in a walking boot. I don't know exactly when this puck hit him that hurt him, because someone said to me it's possible he'd been bothered by something for a little bit of time, but it sounds like he's going to be in a walking boot for 2 weeks, and this is a week-to-week thing. Like, someone said to me they thought the max would be like 6 weeks, but everybody seemed to be hopeful it would be before that. So, it's just too bad. Like, you want to see Levshunov in this prospect tournament, and he's not going to be there. Nobody likes to see guys get hurt.
You know where we really failed to pick up on when chatting with both Jack and Quinn was when they talked about the low score on the golf course for the Hughes brothers for the summer and the club championship. They talked about each other, but there was no mention of Luke there.
Yes. So basically what you're telling everybody is we did like a 0 out of 10 job at these interviews. 0.
Yes. We were 30 minutes from the strip, but that's where our minds were.
The players are in preseason form. We are not. We were not even in preseason form at this one. The slews, if Kyle and I were the stars of True Detective, all crimes would go unsolved.
Especially because our old teammate Shirley Najak, he would always say, I'm not worried about the focal point on the screen. I'm watching around there. That's where the good stuff is.
That's right. That's exactly what he talks about. We blew it. We blew it. We blew chunks. We didn't just blow it. We blew chunks.
And we will try to be better going forward. Hey.
No. I'm not promising that.
All right. Well, that makes one of us. Phil Kessel, Elliotte. He has not played a National Hockey League game since 4 games during the Golden Knights' run to the Stanley Cup in 2023. But you seem to think he's not done trying to land somewhere to continue his career.
He wants to play. I've heard this. So Paul Bissonnette had a tweet this week about how come Phil Kessel can't get a job. And I was looking at it, and because I had heard and I was going to check that Kessel was calling teams and really wanted to play. And that seems to confirm it. And then I heard it from a couple of people. He's legit about it. Like that 3-on-3 league that was supposed to start up but didn't. I heard Kessel was one of the guys they were really talking to about playing there. He wants to play. He loves hockey and he wants to play. I don't know if this is going to happen, but it's very, very legitimate that he has put it out there that he wants to play.
All right, Elliotte, that'll bring us to the final thought, which is presented by GMC. And listen, it was a real emotional start to the week. Monday was the funeral for Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew. It was incredible strength and composure from Meredith and Madeline Gaudreau as they provided their eulogies for their husbands. And Elliotte, you wanted to make a point of the support that was not only on hand there Monday, but continues to be shown around the hockey world.
Yes, someone reached out to me and just said, can you mention on the podcast how grateful that everyone was for the amount of support that was shown to the family? First of all, in terms of who everybody was expecting to show support, like you expect the teammates, the friends to be there, and they all were. Nobody failed. The teams didn't fail. Their representatives, the NHL, the Players Association, nobody failed. Everybody came came through the best they could. I think also like just some of the people who showed up at the funeral that maybe weren't being expected to be there. Martin St. Louis and Jeff Gordon were there representing the Canadians. Brian Burke was there. John Tortorella was there. There were obviously everybody was expecting Sean Monahan and Kevin Hayes to be there, but I don't mean to exclude anyone, but there were just a number of people who were there. I remember my mother passed away when I was 11, and I remember me and my two sisters were driving in the limousine from the service to the burial site, the plot, and there was just such a lineup of cars behind us as we looked out the back, and I remember thinking like, wow, that's a lot of people. In that moment, it really gives you some strength, and it's the one thing that gives you really a good feeling on that day. So I wanted to mention that, but also like it was mentioned too that just the outpouring of the fans, the GoFundMe support, both the one that was created for Matthew Gaudreau's family, there was the Columbus Blue Jacket fans put one up, and also just all the highlights there were some threads out there talking about name your favorite Gaudreau play or Gaudreau moment, and I think there's a Flames fan blog that's doing like a Johnny Gaudreau goal a day. I know that was really, really well received. Like everybody plays a role, right? Like you think, well, you're not Gaudreau's friend or you're not Gaudreau's teammate, so what can you do? I think this is proof that just throwing something, a positive memory out there on social media, it matters. Like people noticed all this. So I just wanted to mention that. There was another tragedy in the hockey world. Stephen Peat, who played for the Capitals amongst other teams, he died this week after being hit by a car. Stephen Peat had a really, really hard post-hockey life. And I know there's some people who listen to this podcast who really worried about him, really wanted to see if they could find a way to help him. I know Glenn Healy at the Alumni, he worked with Pete quite a bit, or worked to try to help Pete quite a bit. When I spoke to Glenn a couple of days ago, he was well aware of what was happening, and they were trying to figure out, what they could do. It's a really, really sad story. And, Pete obviously not as big a name as Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau, but that doesn't make it any less impactful. And I was just really sorry to hear about it. And we just wanted to make sure that people knew about the story and heard about Stephen Peat as well.
To the friends and the family of Stephen Peat, we send our love. That was the final thought presented by GMC. Back with more after this. Listen to the 32 Thoughts podcast ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. So before we get to our interview with Sidney Crosby, we wanted to mention that the Thought Line is coming back this year. We're going to start it up again next week. More details on all of that to come on Monday's podcast, so stay tuned on that front. Okay, now, time for our conversation with Crosby that we had earlier this week at the Player Media Tour in Las Vegas. The captain of the Pittsburgh Penguins, three-time Stanley Cup champion, and goes into this year 8 goals shy of 600 for his career. The one, Sidney Crosby. Enjoy.
Sidney Crosby, the captain of the Pittsburgh Penguins, entering your 20th season now in the National Hockey League. I wonder, at this state of your career, how often over the course of a season does one of the training staff come up to you and say, hey, so-and-so across the hall would love a stick, would love something signed? How often does that crop up now over the year?
Fairly often, almost nightly, I think, at this point. But I tend to do that a little more myself now. So yeah, I think as I kind of go through it, you realize those are cool things, sticks and having memories and things like that. So try to take advantage of that too and trade when I can.
Yeah, what do you do with them? Do they is there a spot in the house where they or displayed, or?
Yeah, I've just got them in a room right now. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I think it's always fun when, you know, guys come over to the house. They want to see the different sticks, different curves, and things like that. So, yeah, it's something I started to do probably the last number of years, and yeah, it's fun when people see all the sticks.
Do you have a specific message that you write, or you personalize it for each person?
Try to personalize it. You know, there's it depends. Depends on the situation, the player. There might be history there.
Yeah.
And yeah, usually it's usually something personal though, if I can.
What's the funniest message you've ever, when you think is the funniest message you've ever written to somebody?
I can't even remember, but there's been a number of times where guys have asked me for sticks before the game, and by the time, you know, you get it over there, it's after. But there's been a run-in during the game, so there's always some fresh material to use as far as personalizing stuff. But,
Dear Corey Perry, you're a jerk. Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, there's always stuff like that, but it's fun. That's part of it.
Okay, so I'm interested in the way, Kyle, because a couple of years ago you were here. You just turned 37. You said you wouldn't be doing this at 40. I remember. Is that still the way you're thinking? Because you're still at the top of your game. You could play for years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't want to look too far ahead. You know, I think when you talk to guys who start to get later on in their careers, you know, there's a lot of things that you're balancing, and you go off, you know, your body and how you feel mentally and things like that. So to predict that now is impossible, but I would say I'm probably a little more open than I was before to get into that point if I feel good. So it's hard to say and predict that.
Okay, you said yesterday you're getting close and something's going to happen. The one thing I was curious, I have two questions. Number one, I was curious about the term for that reason. And number two, is there going to be an 8-7 in the contract?
The 8-7, I don't know. But as far as the term, I think a lot of it has to do with what we just talked about. You know, it's just you're basically trying to predict, you know, where you're going to be at, and you know, in a few years. And I'd love to sign an 8-year deal right now. Don't get me wrong, but you know, with my age and, you know, and not knowing how long I'm going to play for, yeah, we'll see what that term is, but you know, it wouldn't be something on the longer end, I don't think.
Is there anything that drives you beyond just the idea of continuing to win more at this stage?
I wouldn't say. I mean, just continuing to play at a high level and making sure that you know, I do my best to you know, to be the best I can on a nightly basis, and obviously hopefully that transfers into winning hockey games. I mean, that's why you play, and it's not really a lot of fun watching the playoffs. You know, you work so hard to be there and to compete, you know, for the Stanley Cup. So you know, not being there the last couple of years, I think it's difficult, and you wanna find a way to get back there. So we've been really close, and haven't been able to get over the hump. So hopefully we're able to do that this year.
So with that said, sorry, I was just going to say, like, how did you decompress then after last year?
Well, it was tough. We made a great run, so you know, to kind of keep ourselves in the fight there for a while. So I think, you know, I think there was a lot of things to feel good about with that finish of the season. Hopefully we can carry a little bit of that momentum, you know, onto this year. But yeah, just understanding how close it is between, you know, getting in and not getting in, and just you know, trying to evaluate all that stuff. But you can do that all day, and at some point you just got to move by it. And I think just getting the rest, making sure that took care of my body as best I could, and get ready for this one.
That's one of the things I heard, Sid, was that just the thing for you is, like, you're a Penguin. You always want to be a Penguin. But I did hear that if there was one thing you were weighing, it's just like that competitive drive that you still have with where the Penguins are. And would you be, I don't even know if okay is the right word, but would you be able to handle things if they didn't result in playoffs? That's what I heard your biggest thing was.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. I think it's so hard to make it. There's lots of teams that go into a season that expect to make it that don't. You know, I think that, you know, the biggest thing, you know, when I think about our team is just our culture and the expectation to win has been there, every year. Regardless of if we won the cup the year before or a young team, or there's been so many different situations we've been in going into seasons. So, but I think I really enjoy, the expectation to win. I think that's something that pushes all of us. And, for the guys that have been there for a number of years, Tanger and Gino, that's something that we're proud of. We want to go into a season with that expectation, regardless of what moves are made, what the team looks like. That's something we feel like being a part of that for a long time. That's important, that we want to keep that. And, there's going to be different moves, there's going to be turnover, and that's okay. But, we're coming into the season to try to win, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and hopefully that gets the best out of us.
Said you watched a lot of playoffs this year. Any particular reason you watched more than normal, or anything you noticed that really stood out to you?
I couldn't tell you why. I mean, if I had to guess, I think it's just not being in there for the last couple of years. I think you want to see what separates, the teams that make it and that don't. And the game's always changing. It's always evolving. And ultimately, I think the same things give teams success, but there's little things that may change. Just you look at, say, when St. Louis won, they're a little bit of a heavier team, and the years that we won, we were probably more, skill, speed team. So you look at trends and things like that. But if I had to guess, that's probably why. I just was interested to see, what teams had success and why and that sort of thing. But I thought the hockey was unbelievable, to be honest, watching it, the speed. I thought it was physical. I don't think that, it's gotten faster, but hasn't lost the edge, which is awesome. That's part of the game. And I thought that was on display, all throughout the playoffs.
So can I go back to the stick topic for a second?
Yeah.
When you guys came through Toronto at one point last year, we were doing a little snooping around in the room, and you actually had said to us you were contemplating changing kind of your setup with your stick, which for those that know how you like to have done things over your career, like that was a big deal. Like, did you ever, I know you were practicing with something a little bit different, did you ever use different curve or anything in games last season?
Not in games. I've always kind of messed around with it a little bit. And I've done it a number of times besides last year. It's just, I always feel like I end up coming back to the same one. And that's a pretty big change, when you use something for a long time, as much as I have, especially with my curve, how straight it is.
Yes.
That's a big adjustment, but always looking for ways. And if that's one of them that can make me better, great. But if it's going to be more of a hassle and more of an adjustment, then I'll stick what I have, with what I have at this point.
Okay. Last two for the interview. Number one, Crosby, McKinnon, Marner. Is that the Team Canada line?
Two righties, huh? You're throwing him in? I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of different combinations you can put together with that team. And but thinking of the skill and the guys that are assembled, it'll be pretty cool to see those combinations and what it's going to end up being. But I don't know if I'll get put with two righties or not, and who's going to play center, who's going to play the wing. Yeah, we'll see.
And if you took batting practice, could you hit one out on Paul Skeens?
I don't think so.
Would you want to try?
I would love to make contact with one the way he throws it.
Have you met him at all?
I haven't yet, so hopefully get a chance.
He's awesome.
Yeah, he's playing unbelievable, and I was following a couple games there when he had a no-hitter going, and I think he ended up getting taken out in one of them. I would have loved to see him get one, but it's only a matter of time, I think, at this point.
Yeah, if they came to you and asked, like, hey, would you want to stand in and throw?
I'd love to, yeah. I'd love to, yeah. That'd be scary, I think, but I'd love to make contact.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, whether it's at the plate or most importantly on the ice, we still love watching it. So thanks so much for the time. Have a
Thank
great
you.
year.
Appreciate it.
So, Elliotte, if Crosby ever does get a chance to stand in the batter's box with Paul Skeens,
if that's going to happen now, I guarantee you. Oh, for sure.
We are going to have front row seats for it.
We better. You're telling me they're not going to do this? The two biggest stars in Pittsburgh sports. Well, I mean, you probably could add TJ Watt to that too, but two of the biggest stars in Pittsburgh sports, Skeens and Crosby, and the Pirates and the Penguins are going to let that opportunity pass?
I'm a big believer in manifestation, Elliotte. So the more we talk about it, the better it's going to be. So let's keep this rolling.
And I want to be able to go. Sportsnet, clear that Penguins budget. Take it out of the Blue Jays budget.
And you've got the biggest budget of all, my friend. So we did Vegas.
One less expensive coffee for Jamie Campbell, and we can go down.
Yeah, that's right. So earlier in the summer, you went to Prague in Czechia with our crew from Sportsnet for the European edition of the NHLPA Player Media Tour. And among the players you got to catch up with was the superstar out of Boston, David Pastrnak.
Yeah, he was in a good mood too. Similar to Crosby, just a great mood. And I thought it was a really good interview. So we wanted to play it. We didn't just talk about Swayman simply because you just didn't know if it was going to be timely or not. But we talked about a lot of good things surrounding Pastrnak, and I thought people would just want to hear it. So here we go.
Elliotte Friedman and David Pastrnak from Prague. Enjoy.
All right, so David, this summer, what was the better party? Winning the World Championship or the wedding?
Oh, that's the first tough question. You're gonna put me in this thing. Yeah, what was better? I think it was perfect timing to have it both. Honestly, it was very different crowds. Mm-hmm. Different parties. But the parade was awesome at the Old Square, fun. But the wedding was amazing. It was with a lot of closest friends, mm-hmm. So that was the special thing about it. Here it was with a lot of friends, and the whole country brought together. 2 different parties, 2 were amazing. What a great summer to kick off the summer.
The wedding, I remember my wife said, when we got married, my wife said, all I care about is that everybody says that was the best party they've been to this summer. Did you accomplish that?
I hope so, yeah. They the workers, everybody at the end of the weekend was saying that it's the best wedding they've seen, and that makes you happy, right? That we had amazing guests. They made it super special for us. They were unbelievable. Everybody enjoyed themselves, dancing. We had a 10-minute rain, and we were eating outside, so we were a little worried. But Big Z took credit. Took his shirt off and started dancing. Everybody started dancing. So that was special to see that you really have the best guests there, and we really was planning it a lot for them to enjoy and have a lot of fun. So I hope they enjoyed it.
I saw there's a lot of guys that you don't play with anymore, like Chara,
yeah.
Taylor Hall,
yeah.
Torrey Krug, who I know you're very close with. Like, how emotional is it for you to see all these guys still?
It's good. I'm used to whoever I get a friend with, they either get traded or they retired. So I'm getting used to it now. But that's the business, we are living it. I mean, like, you can't get mad or anything, or sad. That's the business we are in. The team changes every single year. So mm-hmm. you obviously play hockey since you were a kid, because it's such an amazing sport. You found so many friends, and that's the beauty of the sport, that you found live friends, and they play in different teams, but with all these guys, I became super close and happy that we stay friends, even not just colleagues, but we found a friendship. So obviously it doesn't mean that you don't play in Boston anymore. You're not friends. So they definitely became closer friends. That's why they were there. Okay,
so Torrey Krug is not your team anymore, but I heard you guys have some sort of beer drinking game that you continue even though you're not teammates. Yeah. What is this?
That was actually me, Torrey Krug, and David Krejci. Krejci is the one who brought it up.
Okay.
And he calls it gentleman's game. Okay. And there is only 2 rules. But this, if you start a game, it goes forever. No matter if you are together or not. And the one rule is, so I'm lefty, so I always have to drink with the right hand.
Okay.
So I cannot drink with my left. And they are both righties, so they drink with their left. And the second rule is you can put the drink on the table, and like if I catch it with the edge, if my finger touch it,
yes,
the drink, mm-hmm. then you have to finish it. So you always have to put it farther, But if you put it over here and then I call you out and I can touch it, then you have to finish the drink. And same thing with the hand. If you drink with your right hand, I call you out, and you have to finish the full drink. And this goes forever. And it's a gentleman's game, so.
So you call it's honor system, and like will you get like a random picture from Torrey Krug or David Krejci saying I broke the rule? Will you?
No, not that. But like I've got burned. For example, we were FaceTiming, or I send them picture of having a beer, and sometimes they was close to the edge, so they would call you out even through the message. But this is it's just now I can't even drink honestly with my left. Anything I drink is always with my right, because we've been playing it for so long.
That's awesome. I love that. Even that is a fantastic story. I actually have heard you're like the king of FaceTiming. Like we all saw it after you won the championship at the Worlds. Is it true that you're the king of FaceTiming? You do it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm super bad at texting, and anytime the text has longer than one sentence, there is no reply from me. There's no chance I can reply.
Really?
I panic always when I see long texts. I don't want to read them. So it's always, for me, it's easier to FaceTime and answer that. But yeah, it's good. I like to see the person when I talk to it. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's better. You have the eye contact.
Yeah.
You can be true. Then it's good. But obviously, I don't know if I'm a king.
But you know what I'll say is this is good. If anybody ever wants a text reply from you, don't make it more than one sentence. That's what we've all learned from now.
That's true. Or FaceTime.
So World Championships, earlier today we talked to Peter Mrazek and we talked to Martin Necas, and they said that when they think about that parade, they still get goosebumps on their arm. Yeah. That it still they still get so excited when they think of that victory. You?
It was obviously insane and big relief. Big relief, obviously, we were waiting for a medal for a very long time. We did have a lot of pressure, so there was a big relief at first before all the celebration and everything else kicked in, at least in my head. And then, on the old square, it's just, I remember thinking, there was 4 steps up to the stage, and I took the two steps and I looked at the square, and the first thing I was thinking is, I want to relive it again. But I haven't even got up there, but that's the first thought that stick with me, which was great, and that was the first thing that I thought of. I wasn't even got to the stage, but already said, I want this again, So it was very beautiful. It was unbelievable. How I said, the whole country got together, which, that's the beauty of the sport, that you pull the country all together, no matter where you're from or who you cheer for. They all been there, they created amazing atmosphere. So for me, yes, do I feel like I needed this win for my career? Because I've been waiting for a big win like that. So yes, it was great for my career, towards the motivation and more getting better and stuff. But at the same time, I'm more happy for the country that we won it here and put the country together and made them, cheer for Czech again and get the medal after 14 years. That I put that a little over than myself or anything.
Completely understand. Vejmelka said that he will remember your goal for the rest of his life.
Oh, that's awesome. I will probably too, it was insane. I could never see myself go on my knees celebrating a goal. I thought I would never ever do that. But there was just so much emotions and so much relief. For me, it was so much relief and so much excitement that happened there. It was good.
That's awesome. And you talk about country over self. And that's one of the things I do wonder about. First of all, you must be thinking, now that the NHLers are going back to the Olympics, you must be thinking about I remember watching the pictures in '98 when Czech Republic then won. And you must be thinking about, let's do that again in 2026.
Well, not necessarily thinking about gold medal at the Olympics. Obviously, we have to stay true to ourselves. We have a lot of work to do in hockey. Yes, we can be very competitive. We have a lot of skills. We have a lot of young players that hopefully in 2 years by the Olympics, going to be a big part of the team Olympics. But then at the same time, yes, you have to create a good group of people, you know, and make sure you build a team, and you know, not the players. So we'll see how that goes, but you know, that's very far away. I would right now I'm focusing, you know, on winning a Stanley Cup, and that's my next goal.
Okay, so let's talk about Boston. You know, there are still Leaf fans who are a little annoyed at you for the Game 7 overtime winner. Just like you talked about that, you want that win. Mm-hmm. How close do you feel you are, or the Bruins are?
Yeah, well, like I guess you could say we are farthest as we've been in past years, but I think at the same time we proved a lot of people wrong. Like last year we were not even supposed to make a playoffs. You know, we beat better team, which was, I think, Toronto, like on the paper, was better team, and we beat them, and you know, then we lost against Florida, who were so deep and so good that I think I really feel like we could take them to 7. But there was one game that, you know, circumstances was how they were, but I think we would win that game. You know, we pushed them to 7, and then you never know what happened in Game 7. So I still think we put a really good fight against Florida, but they were just deeper and better.
Okay, so when you look at the Bruins now, you traded Altmark out, you added some people. How do you feel about this team going out of the season?
It's hard to judge. You get new faces coming in. You know, you start from everything, start from zero. The team change, and you as a leader that is there for a while, you have to make sure that yes, the faces change, but in our organization, nothing's changed. You know, and we have to keep holding the structure together, and you know, make sure those guys. Make sure we make it easy transition for the new faces that come, and you know, obviously build a team, because we have to be close together and play for one another, and you know, so that's where you start always as a game 1 starts in the regular season. You know, to build so you are at your best in April. So yeah, I think we got much better this summer. Like you said, we make some moves. Definitely excited to see how is everything gonna sit together, and you know, we got some more experience guys. We had a lot of young guys last year get experience, so you know, I'm very excited, and you know, we got obviously Elias, Lindholm, and for Zadorov, you know, big signing. So exciting to see those guys and make sure they feel comfortable joining our team.
Zadorov looks like a Bruin. Like when I see like Boston Bruins, like Zadorov fits that uniform, doesn't
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, you know, like I was very surprised how skilled he is. You know, for his size, he can move. You know, he can score. We saw it in the playoffs last year, and he's obviously big body, and he can lay down some big guys. You know, and so excited to see some of those big hits. I love to see open ice hits when they're clean, obviously. So can't wait to see some of those this season.
Is it weird at all still, like there's no Chara, there's no Bergeron? Like, did it take you guys a bit of time to get used to not having those 2 guys there?
Of course, I mean, those are, you know, legend. They were there over decades. Berggren almost 2 decades, or maybe 2 decades. I'm not sure. Yeah, he was there 20 years. Holy, yeah, 2 decades. So, I mean, you lose these franchise faces or franchise players to retirement. Of course, it's gonna feel weird and different, you know. But it is, you know, you can't stop time, and that's hockey. You know, they retired, and you know, how I said, it was up to me and Marshy and McAvoy, you know, to step in their shoes, and I think we couldn't have better teachers or teachers, you can say, I guess, as Bergie and Z to follow their lead. So I think you know, they made us as ready as they could.
Okay, 3 more for you. Go ahead. So one thing I like to do when I go to Boston is look up at the banners. Mm-hmm. I love looking up at the banners. Do you ever imagine 88 up there?
No, the last thing I think about, yeah. I mean, I just want to win Stanley Cup. I mean, I could care less about some banner. Obviously, if I win Stanley Cup, that means to me way more than my number being up there. Yes, I'm not playing individual sports, so I really don't think about it. Yes, do I want to perform? I'm statistic-wise, yes, because that's my job. Obviously, I need to make points, I need to score, but that's because that's my job. And if I don't do those, then I'm not doing my job. So yes, I have to do that, but with that thing, I have to be selfish, to think about it.
Yes.
But thinking about winning some trophies, individual trophies, or hard MVP, or even Rocket Richard. That's definitely not on my books when I'm getting ready for the season.
Okay. Second one is, I don't know where this will go after that answer, which is a really good answer, is 61 is your career high. Do you think about beating that?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can beat that.
You're a talented guy, man.
We'll see. This last year I took way more of playmaking role than I used to the years before. I love playmaking. I want to do both, but then also with that, if you start overpassing, then a lot of goals gonna go away. So I don't know. Would I like to beat it? Yes, obviously. That's you. You should as a player. You want to beat it. You want to be better than last year, but I don't mind sparing the numbers between playmaking and scoring goals. But I love both. So as long as there is a one or the other I can help or pass the score, and I'd be more happy than scoring 60 again.
Awesome. Second last one. People who talk about you say that you're incredibly caring and you really look out for other people. What does that mean to you that people say that about you?
Well, that's very nice to hear. I don't know if people say that about me. But yeah, I mean, I'm very family oriented, obviously, always care for my friends, and so yeah, I mean, there's been a lot that people say that and recognize that, so it's nice because it's true, and proud of that.
Okay, and last one. If there's anything about the NHL you could change, what would it be?
I would make the game-winning shootout count as a goal in the statistic, like in Europe.
Yeah.
The shootouts, they don't count, right?
Yes.
Which I understand, but the game-winning shootout should count as a goal in your statistics.
Okay.
Because that counts in Europe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. That can get you over 61.
Yeah. Focus more, too.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So that's going to do it for this week's episode. We got a chance to sit down with a number of players in Vegas this past week. We're going to roll those interviews out as we go along here, an inch closer to the beginning of the regular season. In the meantime, though, we are going to be back with our regularly scheduled pod drops of Mondays and Fridays starting next week. As we mentioned, the Thought Line is coming back. Stay tuned on all of those fronts. We are less than a week from the opening of training camps across the league. We can't wait. In the meantime, though, take care. Thank you for listening, and have a great weekend.